try this without the microphone. If you can't hear me, just let me know.
Okay.
So I'm back. I misread my email, so I thought Geshe-la was teaching this class and the following class, but when I went back and checked, I'm doing it. So sorry for all of you who just, I told everybody's, oh, Geshe-la will be back next weekend. So you got the sub again. But in this class, we're gonna finish up the chapter on patience. There are a few other points that I wanted to call out. And then in the next class, we'll move on to joyous perseverance. So thank you for being patient with the chapter on patience. I know when Geshe Sopa at Deer Park in Wisconsin, when he was teaching this chapter, he went just on the topic of patience. He went on for many, many, many months, if not longer. And so one of the things that I wanted to do today, actually the main focus of today's presentation, is just pulling out some of the beautiful points that Geshe Sopa makes in his teaching on patience, and all of this has been pulled together in his series. This is volume 3 on the Steps on the Path to Enlightenment. Just a really, really detailed, easy to read commentary on the Lamrim Chenmo. So if you haven't seen it, you might want to check that out.
Is it Lama Sopa?
It's Geshe Lundrup's Sopa.
Oh.
Geshe Lundrup Sopa, who passed away a number of years ago, unfortunately, but taught and established and taught from Deer Park Center in Madison, Wisconsin for maybe 30 years or so before he passed. He was one of the first Tibetan teachers to come to America in the late, like mid-60s, early 60s, somewhere in the 60s. So extremely kind, wonderful Lama. And definitely I wouldn't be here today if it weren't from the short time that I had in attending his teachings in Wisconsin. So, because he was just so inspiring, and his presence was so warm and magical, and then his community there, everybody was very open-hearted and kind. It was just a very close-knit community that had been with him for many, many years. And yeah, he's just an incredible person. Just like, Khenpo Rinpoche, this picture, Geshe Lundrup Sopa. Yeah, Geshe Lundrup Sopa. Amazing. So there's a whole series of his teachings on the Lamrim Chenmo. I think it's 5 volumes, maybe up to 5 right now, all the way through the through calm abiding. Maybe they did the wisdom chapter already. I'm not sure. To go back and double check. I haven't read it. So let's start today with our meditation. So just as we did in the last class, we're going to start off by just observing the mind. So sit comfortably with our backs straight, hands folded either loosely in your lap or on your knees if you're sitting in a chair, whatever feels more comfortable. We can start by just scanning our bodies, looking for areas of tension, or just checking in and seeing what's going on. Working from the crown of the head, slowly, slowly. Not just at the surface layer, but exploring inside. Seeing the dynamic processes. Winds and energies flowing. And bringing your attention to the breath, either at the tip of the nose, or focusing down at the abdomen. Just relaxing into the natural rhythm of the breath. And relaxing your attention on the breath. Just allow your mind to relax. Very big and open, spacious. And just sit and watch and see how thoughts arise. How they play out without our becoming involved in them in any way. Not distracted, pulled up or down, left or right. Simply sitting and seeing how this process unfolds. Just allow the thoughts to arise. And then disappear. when a very pleasant feeling arises, witness how that emotion arises. Where does it come from? How does that energy then disappear? Without trying to hold on to that pleasant experience, that pleasant memory, or even anticipation. Just letting it go. Similarly, when an unpleasant memory or an unpleasant thought of the future arises, perhaps some pain that you're experiencing right now, see how that too seemingly arises out of nowhere, abides and disappears. Without trying to reject, push away that experience, that feeling. Again, just sitting with it, observing the process. And continuing our meditation, I'd like to just read a little bit of Lama Geshe Sopa's explanation of the benefits of patience, because we've been studying this for several months. And by reflecting again on the benefits, then think to yourself, how has this careful study of patience made a difference in my life? So as I read this, then just try to think about these wonderful So patience gives us the strength never to give up acting for the benefit of others. Patience protects us from the enemy, the hatred that destroys many merits. There's so many things that usually bother us or make us angry, but once we have patience, we're able to stay calm. Patience is the ornament that makes all who possess it attractive. Likewise, it is the best austerity because it makes us immune to difficulties, hardships, and suffering. It's like a stream of water that extinguishes the fire of hate. Patience subdues hatred, just as a Garuda, a powerful mythical bird, a powerful eagle, conquers snakes, because when a Garuda flies above, snakes dare not come out of their holes. Patience is armor that cannot be pierced by an enemy's arrows. It is the method to create the perfect body of a Buddha. These are the benefits of patience. So just take a moment and try to think maybe of a specific situation in your life where you've consciously decided to apply what you've learned about patience, maybe. Rejoice in the benefits of practicing patience in that situation. Practicing patience is one of the core guidelines for living the life of a bodhisattva, somebody who has decided that the best way to make this precious life meaningful is by serving others. So the goal of perfecting our practice of patience is for helping our mother sentient beings, seeing all who we encounter as an equal, as a brother or sister suffering in samsara. And just as if we know that somebody close to us, starting with someone close to us, if we know that a friend or a family member is experiencing pain, whether it's the chronic pain of cancer or any kind of dementia, any kind of physical or mental hardship, just knowing that that person's life is in a state of chronic pain, and that gives us inspiration and motivation to pursue this noble path, hoping to free them from such horrific suffering. And realizing that our present life in samsara is also pervaded by similar suffering. And so there's a verse in Shantideva's verse 80, Actually, this is in the previous chapter, chapter 5. So this is a very beautiful, beautiful verse. So I thought we would actually try to do this. So look at someone next to you. Now you get to open your eyes. And then look at someone close to you. Like you really have to turn and look at somebody. So see if you can pair up, okay? Look at you. And this is the verse. You should remember this verse. It says, when beholding someone with my eyes, you have to look at somebody. We're not letting anybody get away with this, all right? When beholding someone with my eyes, thinking I shall fully awaken through depending upon this person. Okay. When beholding someone with my eyes, thinking I shall fully awaken, I shall attain enlightenment through depending upon this being, I should look at him or her with an open heart and love. What a beautiful thought, huh? So every time, we look at each other, that has to be first and foremost in our minds. Even if the person's yelling at us and telling us we're an idiot or, whatever, right? Try to keep that thought in mind. So powerful. Because it's the truth, right? The whole teaching converges down to this, right? The whole purpose of life is this dependent relationship, how we're dependent on others for happiness, for going all the way up to full liberation, right? We're not going to do it just by ourselves sitting on a rock in the cave, right? We'll get to that point after an independence on this practice of being with others. Okay. So I thought that was very, very good. Okay. So you can do that as part of your meditation practice in the morning as well, right? Just go back to that verse, read it over and over again. You can think, so you're setting your motivation for the day, okay? That can be part of it. And even at the end of the day, when you're reviewing how the day went, you can think of your encounters with others. Think, was this my main? Was I able to hold this thought in mind? I'm sorry, can you repeat it one more time? So I was thinking you could use the same verse. Read the verse. So it's verse 80. In chapter 5, it says, when beholding someone with my eyes, thinking I shall fully awaken through depending upon this being, I should look at him or her with an open heart and love. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, actually, the previous chapter, so we're on chapter 6, which is patience. But as I was, getting ready for this class, I went back, I reread, starting from the beginning of the book. And chapter 5 is called Guarding and Alertness. And so all of the explanation of how to practice, how to guard the mind is all explained in chapter 5. So there's a very close relationship between the two chapters. So it's a really good idea to go back, if you haven't already done that, to go back and read chapter 5 in parallel with chapter 6. And so Geshe Sopa does that. He integrates many of the verses from chapter 5 into chapter 6. So some of the difficult points, right? This is actually, a very, very challenging chapter in many ways, because it causes us to have to think about some really key aspects of thought, Buddhist thought, right? And so I just kind of jotted down some random ideas. First is this whole idea of karma, right? And how we often find ourselves in a situation where we think, oh, like, I'm such a good person, I'm trying so hard, and yet bad things, why do bad things happen to good people? And so the teaching on karma is one of the main principles that underlies this chapter on patience. And so I'm going to go through that in more detail today, because that was the central focus of Geshe-la's presentation. Then we need to, but for us, coming from a Western perspective, that whole idea is quite novel. Then the second idea was that bad things happening or suffering ripening is actually good. Right? That's also kind of something that causes us to scratch our heads. Bad things happening to us is actually good. Suffering is good because we can use it to purify negative karma so that we never experience that karma ripening again. So in the future, it's actually going to lessen our suffering. So the pain that we experience today, we have to be able to train ourselves to say, oh, okay, well, that's good. That's nothing to be upset about. And that's hard, right? It's easy to say, easier to say than to do. But if we practice over and over again, then it'll become easier. The third point I thought of that struck me was that that idea of the mind is helplessly under the control of negative emotions, right? That sense that the negative emotions drag us around. And then that's just the nature of our beings. The next is that mind's true nature is compassion. And this compassion can emerge, can manifest when the negative emotions and self-grasping that have been a part of us for so long, but when we consciously make an effort to uproot these negative emotions and self-grasping, eventually, when we're proficient at that, then more and more of this innate compassion is going to emerge. So again, that might be something that seems unfamiliar to us. And the next point was that enemies are actually not external, right? We normally think that somebody who's challenging us is definitely out there causing us harm. But actually, the main enemy that we're combating is internal. It's within our own minds, right? That's a really, really big part of this chapter. That the true enemy is actually our own minds, which is good because, if it's in your own mind, then you can do something about it, right? There's no way we're going to be able to combat countless external enemies, right? Because they're outside of our control, essentially. But we can definitely work with our own minds. So that's a positive right there. But again, it's something that is not familiar to us, something that's worth really considering. Finally, and this is something that we didn't really talk about too much, so this is kind of a new point that we'll focus on today, that ultimately, since all phenomena are illusions, that all phenomena come together, arise due to a very complex relationship of causes and conditions. So all phenomena are illusory, in that sense, that there's nothing to get angry about, right? Like, what are you getting upset about if it's just this intricate coming together of like karma causes and conditions ripening? So that the actor, the action, and the emotion, all of that can be seen to have just as much reality as a magician's spell, something created by like an illusory apparition that a magician would dupe us with. Okay, so if we can get to the point where we've studied the topic of emptiness, familiarized ourselves so that we can see all phenomena we can experience all phenomena from that perspective, then absolutely, you know, these enemies are never going to even appear. Right? Okay. So that was my summary of the difficult points. Does anybody have any other difficult points or any comments on that?
I just have difficulty. I understand what you're saying, just experiencing it. Get what is emptiness. I just.
We'll talk about it a little more.
Get hit by a car, how that's an illusion.
Right. How much it hurt. Yeah, so it's not denying the idea of that there are two truths, right? This is a very difficult topic. So the Buddha has taught that there's both like a conventional reality, ordinary reality, like you said, you know, the car hitting us and the pain associated with it, and then and another level, parallel to that, there's this idea that things exist ultimately, that there's an ultimate truth aspect to reality, and that's more when we and the two can only be, these two minds, these two perspectives, right, can only be held perfectly at the same time, simultaneously, if you're a Buddha, right? But the purpose of having the ultimate truth perspective is to help us reduce our attachment, reduce our negative emotions, reduce our self-grasping. So it's more a question of helping. It's almost like for us as ordinary beings, I think of it more as like a tool, like a perspective that helps us keep calm, to help us pursue our understanding of, to continue in our exploration of reality. This is the wisdom teachings. This is the wisdom teachings. So
just to say this when you're practicing, so that something really excruciating pain happens, that it can ease it, but how can I prove to myself, really feel that it's an illusion on this other level? I mean, I really want to be able to.
No, absolutely, yeah. No, we're all striving for the same thing, and it's not immediately apparent. I think this is where the lamas keep telling us to be patient and to meditate over and over and over again, to slowly be able to
you experience this feeling of it being an illusion, a knowledge, the reality.
Yeah.
All else is an illusion in meditation.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's going to take some time to get there. I mean, they're not denying that cars and trains and boats and people exist, right? We definitely exist. We're experiencing this pain, but the wisdom teachings help us explore. You know, how does that pain arise, right? Where does it come from? Where do we come from? Where does this suffering come from, right? And so then we start digging into this idea of karma and how the suffering can be ended. Right. The main thing is, how do we change our actions, our behavior, our attitude, so that we stop the suffering?
So there's a reason, some illness or accident happens, and at least if you can see how out of that grew something positive.
Right. Yeah, that's part of it too. Yeah. So all of this, you know, kind of generally falls under this category, this type of meditation, just wisdom analysis. It's trying to figure out where things come from, how do they exist. Karen?
So I always, a lot of times I go to Shakespeare's line where all the world's a stage, and we're just players. And I went to the teacher for Tendrol last night, and she would like sometimes she'll get into this voice where she'll say, "Oh, woe is me," you know? And so I think of it. That's what sometimes I'll think, if we can get to that point where we'll say and exaggerate it, as if we're in a drama and recognize this is a drama. We are in a kind of drama. And personally, I can say, oh, it was me. I have all this stuff coming at me. I am like, I'm suffering so much.
Right.
It's all about me. So and so is ill, but it's all because of me. He's ill, but I have to and
Right.
If you recognize it's a kind of drama, and just sort of like if you can in your mind play it out and make it more dramatize it like that. That's what she was doing. She was doing like, oh no, it's why are they doing this to me? I've been so good. I'm trying to be a good person, and they're doing this to me. And she was also saying, she's a nun, and she's petite, and she's Caucasian. And she's saying, I have all these things too. I'm not this person that has white, whatever, white. Perhaps she does, but she has all these other things that she's marginalized. So she was saying, perhaps I am Caucasian white, but she's also a woman. She's a nun. Who go to the back of the monastery and all that stuff.
Right.
So she was saying, so maybe that's one way you can sort of think of it sometimes if you can do it.
Yeah. That's helpful.
Slowly but surely, it'll help. The person has to really believe it. I'm thinking of someone who's had a stroke, and his family, daughter and granddaughter, she pretty much raised. Once she got ill, ignore her. Suddenly they're not there to help her. And how do you? She said, I know I have to think positive, but I can feel that all the hurt and negativity is still there. What to do?
I think this is something that I myself have to go. You can't place this thinking on someone else. You can't say this has to be all about your own stuff. Because I don't think
thinking about what did I do to my daughter? And she's she's manic depressive or this or that. And I can't believe it. And I was making a prayer shawl, and it was supposed to be for my granddaughter, but no more. And then I have
you can see that anger.
It's like this cycle.
Yeah, how it just breeds more and more suffering, right?
And if people meditate, just be aware of this teaching in time, you'll forgive the other person, not blame them, and have more of an
we'll continue. We'll keep going, and we'll hopefully we'll answer your question, and if not, bring it up again. But I think that's exactly what we're talking about today. Laura?
I was going to say in relation to karma, since I've been studying, it used to be before I studied it was why me, and now I come to acceptance of these are the cards that were dealt me. Why not me? Who am I that this shouldn't happen to me?
Right.
And I look at it from that angle. Now.
That's very good.
And it's made me, more calm with that. And
more accepting, right? Like, yeah.
Hi. I kind of agree with what everybody's saying. It's what you said, I think, at the beginning that bad things happen to good people, and if I keep that, if I accept that as reality, then it makes it a little less difficult, because I'd like to think that life's fair. But as I get older, I recognize maybe it's not, depending on how you define fair.
Yeah.
But it's, if I were to get bad news, my son was injured or something. Well, that's already happened before the phone call comes to me. So it's kind of like my reaction to the event or the reality that already exists, whether I hear about it or not. It's kind of happened, and then I get that phone call, and now nothing has changed other than now I'm within the dynamics of that event. So I can't really do much about that other than just be a part of it. And that almost makes it a little bit less, I don't know, less big, because I can't do anything about it except now I'm in it. Whereas
That's a
before it
good
was already
perspective.
there, I just didn't know about it.
Right.
So
And I think that perspective makes it easier to have compassion to really be there for this injured person, rather than getting lost
In the sucked into the same emotional turmoil, right? There's a good verse that we will come back to that we talked about last time. I have to find it. The verse that says
I
that.
have control. I don't really have control of very much at all.
Right. And if you can't do anything about it, then why get all upset? If you can do something about it, then by all means, act in a wise way. Act with wisdom.
And that's a choice.
Exactly. Which speaks to, exactly what you were saying. Yeah. Okay, so let me just go through some of these points that Geshe Sopa made that I think are a little bit more nuanced. So just as a reminder, or things that maybe I didn't explain clearly, that when I read it again, I thought, hey, I better bring that up. The first is that the definition of patience. Patience is always in the context of helping others, right? So we're not talking about just being patient, waiting for the postman to show up with your package, right? This is specifically in the context of helping others, right? And so the goal is to help others. And so we're being patient with any hardships that occur as we pursue that goal, right? So maybe it was, getting in the car and you want to come to the Dharma class, but, you run into traffic or something. So you're being patient with the traffic because your goal is to help others, or you're trying to help somebody who's depressed, but they don't want to hear you. Okay, so you're going to be patient with whatever's involved in listening to them and sitting with them, going through that hand-holding with the goal of helping them. And so as we train on this path, as we remain in relationships with others and try to support others and be there for them, then gradually, then as our own self-grasping, diminishes through our meditation practices, then this idea of joy, right, the joy of a bodhisattva practicing patience is such that, no matter what happens, even if, you're helping somebody and they bite you, you try to say something kind, but then they insult you, right? All of that, from a bodhisattva's perspective, is just fuels this. It doesn't bother them at all, and if anything, that helps them increase the joy that they feel on a moment-to-moment basis. Okay. So Geshe Sopa makes a comparison of like a boxer. So if you're a boxer in the fighting ring, right, you keep going, no matter how many times you're knocked down, right, you're going to get back up and you're going to keep going because you got this goal of winning the match, right? So if our patience is very strong, then we're able to do that, to disregard those strong, punches to the gut, punches to the head, etc. But if our patience is weak, then the first time we get knocked down, right, the first time somebody says, hey, I don't need your help, take a hike, right, then we're just going to give up. We're like, okay, forget it. The whole path is ridiculous. I can't do this, right? So that's just the reminder that patience here is in the context of helping others. It's not being patient, waiting so you can be the first in line to get into Walmart on Black Friday, right? No. This is.
You should still be patient then.
Well,
you shouldn't get all upset.
And cut in line and do it. So yeah, but here we're talking about patience in the context of helping. Yeah. And then so we talked about 3 kinds of patience, right? So the patience, the first one was disregarding harm, accepting hardships. And then the third is this, going back to this idea of emptiness. Again, he says, there's no ultimately existing enemy, right? It's just a combination of causes and conditions that create the situation where the actor, the object, and the action, I said that wrong before, the actor, the object, and the action are all empty of having any independent existence. So he says, an erroneous understanding of emptiness makes uneasiness and fear go away.
Can you give an example of the actor, the object, and the action?
So the actor would be somebody who tells a lie. The action is the lie itself, like the world is going to explode in 10 minutes. And then the recipient would be the person who is listening to the lie.
And thus
Affected, right?
Action, or
So the act of my act, so let's say I tell you that the world's going to end in 10 minutes, right? So I need a lie and I need a recipient, right? If I just say that out to the sky and there's nobody to hear me, then that's not really a lie, right? That's not going to complete the action. So here, let me get this quote.
Lie to oneself.
Yeah, you could lie to yourself. Yeah, that's a good example.
So I want to end first before everything explodes.
That's a good example. Yeah. So that definitely is included. Yeah.
What was the line? What was the conclusion?
Yeah, wait, I'm going to find the actual one because I think I wrote it down. Sorry. Okay, here. An errorless understanding of emptiness makes uneasiness and fear go away because we see there is no real enemy trying to cause us absolute harm. The true nature of reality is that there is nothing to be angry about. It's all equally empty of ultimately existing. So this kind of patience, knowing the emptiness of things, is a deeper and more subtle form of patience. It's the antidote to our usual incorrect perception of things as truly real. So again, since we haven't worked with cultivating wisdom, thinking about emptiness very much, particularly this is our Sunday morning class, then just keep that in mind. Think that, that's something that I'm going to study more in the future so that we can continue to deepen our practice and understanding of patience. And all, not just patience, but all of the perfections.
So can we kind of look at it like what you just read? It's like thinking of events not really having a direct intention, like an intention to hurt you.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that would be the emptiness of, just things that are happening in life. It's not personal, It's,
right.
so there's no like motivating.
And that's one of the points, that comes up later. Yeah, that's one aspect of it. Sure.
So it's the illusion that the person really seems intent on hurting, his revenge, it's illusion. Because some people really want to hurt other people.
No, absolutely. Right. If somebody's out there, with a stick and they're about to hit you, it's hard to say, oh well, I'm an illusion, the stick's an illusion. but from that ultimate level perspective, then then the thinking is that all of these come together as a result of karma, right? As a result of your perception of the situation, right? You're only in that situation for a reason, right? Because of actions that you committed in the past, because of actions that the other person committed as well, right? It's all just coming together, but
to try and stop this person from hitting you with the stick or leaving the situation, is escape still a compassionate thing?
yeah.
I think so. You don't want to stay around and get beat up.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you think about it, right? Yeah. So if you're thinking I'm exhausting all of my negative karma, and you're actually thanking this enemy, right? That's the training that we're talking about here. We're practicing patience and saying the suffering that I'm expecting from this person is actually a gift, right? You're saying thank you for helping me exhaust the negative karma that's ripening now. Like, so this is a short-term, fixed almost amount of negative karma that's being used up, right? And so there's no other way to exhaust that karma except through the assistance of somebody else.
Could I exhaust the karma by turning my back on it? You know, take the fear, the situation is there. This is karma, but I can still leave. And not leaving doesn't mean I'm escaping karma.
Well, yeah, I mean, like in all practicality, if somebody's going to shoot you with a gun, like, yeah, you should probably get up and leave. I mean, especially at our level, right? At our level, we're just we're not ready to see and act in our best long-term interests, which probably would be actually to stay. But maybe, okay, wait, I wanted to find this one thing. I had some really, really beautiful quote. Again, on how we, right, okay. Yeah, I think this kind of goes along with the point that you're making, Beth. Again, this is from Sayings of the Kadam Masters, the book of Kadam, the core text, the big book. He talks about how, this is the spiritual master, very famous teacher, Chengawa. He says, to attain liberation and omniscience, you must train and practice in a practice that is at variance with all worldly people. So again, like I was saying earlier on, how we really need to turn our perspective, 360 degrees. That many of these points really challenge our conventional way of thinking. And so here are just a couple of them. Worldly people cherish themselves more than others. Okay, we've been talking about that. Practitioners, on the other hand, should cherish others more than ourselves. Why? Since beginningless time, we ourselves have caused our own sufferings. Nobody else has made us suffer. We say at present that it is the afflictions that cause us to suffer. Yet between afflictions and self, there's no real duality. So self is the enemy that has made us suffer in a cyclic existence since beginningless time. So the purpose of our practice then is to combat, the real enemy, which is these afflictions. Okay. Instead, we should be cherishing others, right? Since in relation to other sentient beings, this is how we accumulate merit. That's what I was just talking about. All the happiness in the world arises from them, so we must cherish them, no matter what we do. When they're challenging us, when they're yelling at us, when they're running us over with their car, whatever, we have to, instead of getting angry, instead we cherish them, thank them. Okay, since it's on the basis of sentient beings that we cultivate bodhicitta, it's from them that all the higher qualities of nirvana come into being. So they're absolutely crucial to any progress on our spiritual path. There will be no progress without other sentient beings challenging us. Okay, and that's why in the last class we did that exercise where you were supposed to be like poking and prodding each other. We did that car accident, that crazy scenario role playing. Right, the point was to try to provoke the other person to play with them, to help them see the self-cherishing mind, to see how we can try to be patient, and yet, oftentimes it's just a thin veneer. The anger is very close to the surface. Likewise, worldly people cherish those who help them more than those who cause them harm. And we, on the other hand, must do the opposite. Okay. Why is that? In worldly terms, one's parents are the greatest source of benefit, right? Parents give their children everything, but from the point of view of Dharma practice, there's nothing more harmful than having been given, wealth, a house, a nice car, whatever. Because again, and we've talked about this, that being given a whole lot of material goods, all that type of material comfort, actually does what? It causes us to be stuck in samsara even more. It deepens, it strengthens the chains of attachment that cause us to be reborn in samsara over and over again, right? So although on the one hand, you would say, oh, thanks, thanks, Mom, for the $1 million. Actually, that's very short-sighted, right? Okay. Finally, worldly people cherish pleasure more than hardship. And we, on the other hand, must do the opposite and cherish hardship more than pleasure. So worldly people are attached to the pleasures of going to bed, sleeping, laziness, clothes, and food. But all of those, again, are just causes of suffering. So that's that idea that things that we normally think of as pleasure, samsaric pleasures, are just that. They're just suffering in disguise. So we, on the other hand, must cherish hardship because through the pains involved in serving teachers, from practicing virtue, right? Then that's the way that our accumulations of merit will be completed and obscurations purified. We therefore attain the state of great bliss. So cherish hardiness. Cherish rather than run away and reject hardship. He says that, Chengawa says, it's on the basis of physical illness and mental pain that one experiences disenchantment towards cyclic existence and generates true renunciation, right? Going back to that point that we need to think of suffering as more beneficial on our spiritual path than ordinary pleasure. It's tough, right? Again, that goes back to the difficult points. So hopefully that's a good synopsis, a good reminder of how we need to do this 360-degree turnaround and how we deal with suffering on a day-to-day basis. Okay. So then going back to the points, so this is really good. It's maybe easier to understand. Geshe Sopa talks about how there are different levels of patience. And he says that for each of the 3 types of patience, there is an opposite to it. Okay, so the opposite, so the first type of patience was disregarding harm done to us, right? So the opposite of this type of patience, what opposes it is anger, right? So anger is what causes us not to be able to disregard the harm done to us. If we don't have that type of patience, then our anger is just going to increase, right? The intensity of the anger can increase, the number of enemies that we see out there can increase. I think the frequency of times that we get angry, because it becomes a habit, that can increase as well. The opposite of accepting hardship in pursuit of the goal, the opposite of that, what overcomes that, what challenges that, is that hatred and discouragement can arise, right? Hatred and discouragement will prevent us from continuing to try, right? The minute somebody gives us a hard time, even though we're trying to be patient and kind to them, the minute somebody talks back, stabs us in the back, whatever it is, right? Then we might just say, again, forget this, can't do it too hard, maybe in the next lifetime, whatever. So finally, the last type of patience, which is being able to see things through the lens of ultimate truth from that perspective. If we give up on that type of patience, if we can't cultivate it, then what happens is that we can dislike or have less enthusiasm for continuing to practice the path. Again, that we're discouraged, and the joy, the zeal that we engage in practices to help others just gradually fades away, and we give up. Right? So I thought that was really interesting too. So the perfection of patience, which is what Bodhisattva is striving for, the perfection of patience then is not holding any of these three opposites, right? So not having anger, not having the hatred and the discouragement that can arise when we encounter hardships, being free from any of these opposing forces to the cultivation of the three types of patience.
The third type of patience you called what?
Thinking about the nature of reality, causality, and emptiness. Sure. So being able to, so here again, a little bit of a recap, but just so beautifully written. We don't need to subdue or control others. All we have to do is control our own mind. We can accomplish all our goals by doing this. So we really need to think, do we agree with that statement? If we conquer anger and develop a loving attitude, then there's no one and no thing left to be an enemy. Logically, right? That makes sense. If we conquer anger and develop a loving attitude, then there's no one and nothing left to be an enemy. When bodhisattvas perfect patience, it's impossible for them to feel hatred because they see all reality with wisdom. Since they understand that there are no absolute enemies, all negative actions that directly or indirectly involve others cease. Everyone becomes an object of their love and compassion. They no longer have any selfishness, so every one of their actions is peaceful, and no injury can come from their actions. Their actions result only in happiness, higher rebirth, liberation, and enlightenment. The mental strength not to embrace anger and hatred is the perfection of patience. Sounds pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
Everybody convinced? Okay. So patience is one of the most powerful practices. By controlling the internal enemy, which is anger, it's a victory over all enemies. Once you've developed patience to that level, then nothing bad can ever happen. Right? Okay. Just a couple more points, and then we're going to do our little exercise. I hope this is interesting. I hope this is helpful. One vote of confidence. But it's really important to understand patience. Otherwise, if somebody just tells you to be patient, without us, really thinking through what does it mean, and what's the goal, what's the benefit, then you're not going to really try, because it's easier to get angry, right? It's easier to just tell somebody to buzz off. It just comes very naturally, right? But to practice patience, then you really have to think. Okay, so here's another really good point for all of us who are studying. This is really interesting. Again, it goes back into explaining how karma works, right? So I thought this was good. These are the causes and conditions that cause anger to arise. So he says, what does it mean to say that people are powerless when they get angry and try to harm you? Remember we talked about this before? We even did like a group discussion on that, right? What does it mean to say when people are powerless when they get angry and try to harm you? Anger is not anger is not the nature of anyone, right? Compassion is the nature of everyone, right? Ultimately, compassion is at the heart, lies in everyone's heart, not anger. Okay, people are not born wanting to hurt someone. No one wants our mental afflictions. But how do they come about? They come about as a result of three causes and conditions. So first, there is a predisposition for the mental affliction in the mind. This is the ultimate, the cause. Every time somebody feels anger, what happens? You're planting that seed, right? That's karmic seed to get angry in the future. So whenever the right conditions are present, then the person is going to feel angry again because they just planted that mental seed, right? So if we're having an argument, right, we're both planting mental seeds of future anger, right, in our mental continuums, right? So if two people are arguing, wow, that's a lot of seeds. Three people, if all of us had a big debate, a big argument, then that's a lot of mental seeds for future suffering, right? So you gotta be careful. Okay. So just as an ordinary seed needs conditions such as soil, moisture, and sun to germinate for the propensity of anger to sprout, then what's that second condition? This was a question somebody just raised, right? You need the object, right? So you have to have the objects there to complete the action. So in other words, the second necessary condition, an object must be nearby. The second necessary condition is there must be something to be angry at, right? You don't just get angry sitting by yourself, unless it's angry at yourself. But anyway, okay, so the point is that, but you still have that object, right? You have some reason to get angry, right? So that's number two. Then third is a wrong perception of the object. So here, again, we go back to this idea of ignorance, right? Ignorance projects, it's that interpretation, it's that layering, it's that not seeing the object, as it truly exists, but it's your interpretation of the object, right? So if I have a ham sandwich and I say, I have this mental image of what a ham sandwich should taste like, right? Like it needs mayonnaise and mustard. One of those ingredients is missing. I'm angry. I'm like, who's the idiot who made the sandwich without the mustard, right? Okay, so that's the object. In my case, it would be a veggie burger sandwich. Okay, so it's seeing seeing impure things as pure, impermanent things as permanent. It's all of that. Okay. So when these three causes and conditions are complete, then the result, which is anger, will definitely arise. That's the point, is that when all these three come together, then naturally, spontaneously, anger will definitely rise. Just like if you have the lighter and then the kindling and the right amount of oxygen, and you go flick that spark will definitely ignite, a fire in the same way.
These three were called what?
The causes and conditions for anger to arise. But actually, it's not just anger, right? I mean, we could apply that same logic, that same type of thinking to attachment, or really to anything. Any of the negative emotions, or even, jealousy, envy, right? If you really like a certain kind of car and you see that car on the highway, then, the jealousy will come out. So, some of the analogies or ways in which this internal enemy, you know, is often described. It's often described as a mental illness. I think that's one of the things that Geshe-la always talks about. And it's like it's a form of mental illness. A master-slave relationship, you know, where we're the slaves to our fancies, to our emotions, these negative emotions, and they kick off. The point is that we're so ensnared in this coming together of different causes and conditions that it propels us to continue creating more and more of these karmic dependencies. Right? So you can see from one action, then you know you're creating more of these seeds that, when they come into contact with the right conditions, ripen, and then that causes more actions, right? It just goes on. When you think of the teachings on dependent origination, this is kind of the basic idea underlying.
Sorry. Sorry. About you were talking about the ham sandwich without the no, really. In terms of the wrong perception of the object, were you talking about the mustard being, you know, lines?
Oh.
Ultimate reality?
No, I don't think I was trying to go that far.
Yeah.
I think I was just giving a simple example of like why you might get angry. Yeah. Yeah.
At the root there, aren't you're clinging to something that you have an expectation for,
Right.
rather than accepting what is. And, is that?
Yeah, that's a
part
good way of
where
saying
the
it.
anger is emerging?
Exactly. Yeah. Right, because you had this image of what it should look like, and then when your expectations are not
It's
met,
like, for your patient's discussion, I go outside in the morning and there's a dog barking. And I have this
not mine.
expectation that if I wake up early enough, nobody will be out walking the dog or mowing the golf course
Right.
or whatever. But if you accept that, then the anger doesn't arise.
Yeah. Anything can happen. Yeah, just sit with it. Temporary unhappiness, and then you can rejoice. You can rejoice that, wow, you know, the dog is happy. It's out there running around barking. Great, the golf course is going to look good when I go out and play golf in an hour. Somebody's working hard to make that golf course look good. It doesn't have to be just whatever situation it is, turn it around. I think that's the main teaching here. Turn it around. It's only suffering if we label it suffering, right?
I think our society is really big on stress. You know, we talk about stress being such a bad thing.
Yes.
It's like, man, it's the same idea. It's like just it's perspective, right? Turning it all around so that we can look at the same thing. We don't have to interpret it the same way.
Or at least we don't have to magnify it.
Right. We certainly
That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Dial it down.
Absolutely. And there's times where that intensity feels good, but we're labeling everything just stress is a bad thing, or you know. Yeah. So
How do you work with it?
Also the belief or the assumption that everything's supposed to go the way I want it to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
That's to your point. Yes. A very high
Driving
expectation.
with my wife, she has this incredible expectation that everybody drives in a particular way. It's to her expectations. When they don't, she gets extremely angry. And but it's all built around her personal expectations around the way people should drive. Or you go to Target and there's a long line and you have an expectation that they manage a store in a way that
Right.
you don't have to wait.
Absolutely.
If you release that expectation, then waiting in line isn't a frustrating experience anymore.
Right. Wait till you get to India and like the lines, right? Like, you're out there for hours, right? Yeah. No, but you're right. That's exactly right. It's all of these conceptual concepts that we have, all these expectations, all of these like rules basically it's attachment, right? It's my vision of how things should be, how targets should be run, right? Like you said, yeah, really good points. Yeah, so it's all coming from the mind. It's just our thoughts of how things should be. And when it doesn't happen, we get disappointed, we get frustrated, we get angry. Every aspect of our lives, every relationship, you know, every interaction among people, every moment, you know, like, oh, the room is a little bit too cold, or the room is a little bit too hot, right? Again, it's just my expectation of what the situation should be like. Laura, what are you thinking? You're thinking very hard over there. Nope.
Other things.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just the question about the three conditions and the third,
Causes and conditions.
you know, and you know that kind of referencing ultimate reality, right? And so there's the assertion that you know, our natures are compassionate beings, and that anger is this kind of acquired or has these causes and conditions, but it's not of ultimate reality. But
It's not permanent. Not permanent.
It's not permanent, right? So it seems to me that we, even if we go through all the processes of examining, what's permanent, what's not permanent, how we view that, it seems to me that compassion is ultimately a choice. It's ultimately, you can, take the worldview that, I'll take an example. I mean, I don't watch them very often, but you watch these BBC documentaries, nature documentaries, and they're written and they're put together to show the kind of brutality of nature, right? To give that perception. I mean, you could take a different view of that, but that's really what they're doing. They're kind of saying it's a dog-eat-dog world out there.
Right.
So that messaging is constantly being conveyed in many, many ways.
That's a good point.
To people, to the point where compassion gets kind of put on the side. You can't afford to be compassionate because otherwise you're going to be eaten.
You got to watch the dodo. Well, yeah, no, but I see what you're saying. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
The way.
So I just think that it's very challenging for most people to, particularly in the West, where we're also so encouraged to be individually self-sufficient.
Exactly.
And that kind of combined with this, it's dog eat dog. If you're not careful, you're going to be eaten.
Right.
Right.
You'll be left behind. Yeah.
Tends to get people to choose. As I said, put compassion on the side. Good
point. Very good point. That's why, yeah, this teaching is really quite revolutionary, right? It's really upending the way we think. A quote to your point, because anger and hostility destroy our peace of mind, it is they that are our real enemy. Anger ruins our health. A compassionate attitude restores it. If it were basic human nature to be angry, there'd be no hope. But since it is our nature to be compassionate, there is. Right? So just, essentially flipping it around. So our basic human nature is actually one of compassion. Seen on the Dalai Lama's Facebook post on October 1st.
Well, I'm just going to add that I think there's another dilemma that we often face because, there are many different ways to look at an act, right? If you're observing an action in the world, and one action can be on the face, compassionate, but if we also have this tendency to look behind that because we know our own minds and we know that we can be manipulative. We can look for, if I do this, I'll get this result. So there's, there's a compassionate act that can also be manipulative.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
that's, I mean, that's a dilemma. It's nice to be able to say, oh, that's, you know, that's a very nice thing you just did, right? Thank you. But then, I mean, the mind may, you know, say, well, you know, what does he want from me? You know, what is he really trying to do, and how should I react to that? So
that tendency to be perhaps suspicious of another's generosity.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
because we are also live in what, you know, a transactional, you know, people accept this as a transactional world. You know, I give you this, you give me that.
yeah, but doesn't that come back to that idea of just of self-grasping, right? Like of protecting yourself, of, you know, thinking, oh, somebody, what's in it for me, or what does somebody want from me? It comes back, I think, to that idea.
Well, I mean, I think that's a good solution if you can release
Yeah.
that fear and just see that fear as, you know, your
More
fear
head
as a
stuff.
construct.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And because if you don't go that far, if you don't, you know, start getting into that level of investigation, if you just accept the generosity for what it is, like somebody gives you $1 million, then, you know, that's something to rejoice in, right? You can just keep it at that level, just be happy, right, and let it go. Yeah. Fortunately, I've never had that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. But I know what to do because I've been reading the book, right? Run away as fast as possible.
But I also think, like, if you don't, I think it, John, that it's, you know, our society does have this, like, well, what's the ulterior motive? We're also, if not willing to accept the generosity, we're, you know, hurting somebody, you know, that's just trying to do a nice thing, right? So, I think sometimes, you know, even if I'm a little uncomfortable by it, if it's something, you know, to just kind of put my stuff aside and accept it, so that they can, because they're going to feel good about it.
Oh, I see. You mean so that somebody wants to offer you something,
right? And for me
it can
to
be
say,
difficult
oh,
to accept
you
it.
know, what are they
Yeah,
going to want in
yeah.
return? You know, and just say,
Good
well,
point.
you're blocking their opportunity to be generous, and that's not
Right.
good.
Right. Why go there, right?
Right.
And which speaks to your point about how, you know, we're so independent. We're trained not to accept help, right?
Yeah.
It's like second nature is to say, no, I don't need it. But actually, you
Right.
really did need it.
Right.
Yeah, I was on the crowded bus in DC, and somebody said, no, what was it? Yeah, the bus or whatever. Yeah, it was the bus. And a gentleman got up and said, oh, here, please sit down, which made me think, wow, I look really old. So then, of course, I had to say, no, I don't need to sit down. You sit. So I wouldn't sit down, and he's like, please, just sit down. It'll make me happy. It's like, okay. I sat down.
Right. Something like that. You know, it's just
You can't even sit down, Jesus. Got a real problem. Yeah.
I think the same way though. Oh no, I
Yeah, but then I started getting really tired. So I was very happy when somebody offered me a seat. Then, of course, nobody ever did. Okay. Oh, this was my words of advice for later. All right, wait, just a couple more minutes. Let me just see if I can whiz through some of these so we don't have to go back to this. Just picking out the big points, and then we'll do our exercise. Oh, it's just such a good chapter. Everybody has to promise to go out and get this book. It's just such a good book. This really, really beautiful. Ay, ay, ay. 371. I'm just trying to pick out one or two of these points. Well, this one was kind of funny. I'll skip to this one because I think we kind of covered the other ones. Well, okay, just quickly. So Geshe-la talks about how, we've been talking about how suffering purifies negative karma, right? And so we should embrace the cure, right? So if somebody says bad things about us, if somebody kills us, steals from us, etc., then we have to think that, again, we're taking the cure for our negative karma. They're helping us purify all of that poison that we're so filled with, and that gives rise to suffering in the present, suffering in the future. So we need this type of hardship in order to cultivate patience, in order to purify karma. And so he gives the example of how when we have an operation, right? If you have an operation and you're there under the bright lights, in the surgery theater, as they call it, right? You know that this is going to be very, very painful in order to have, let's say the cancer polluted organ removed or whatever. It's going to be very disruptive and painful, but you also know that, that's a short-term pain that you need to experience so that you're avoiding, the longer-term issues, the longer-term complications, the longer-term possibility of a shorter lifespan. Right? So you accept that kind of short-term suffering in the hopes of pursuing the longer goal of living longer. So likewise, we have to keep that in mind when suffering arises. So if we get into that old argument, in the car, and somebody is saying, no, getting angry or something, then just not reacting, just letting them, because oftentimes if you try to correct somebody, then they get angry too. So maybe just letting it go, just sitting there, not fueling the anger, not supporting the person, but just maybe changing the topic, trying to change the topic, change the radio station, do anything, or just sit. Sometimes the best thing is to just sit and let it blow over, right? So sometimes I remember when I have a child, right? When my son was young and he'd have a temper tantrum, then you just sit, just wait, because that the temper tantrum is going to go away, right? It's going to just lose its energy. It'll just, wait 10 minutes and it's gone, right? Just go.
Is the suggestion that you're describing that everybody carries, and forgive me if I'm way off track here, but that people carry around what effectively is like a karma balance between good and bad karma? Or do I misunderstand?
Yeah, that's one way of thinking about it. So we have many different karmic seeds within us, not just the results of negative actions, but very much so. I should have talked about that more, but all of the virtuous things that you've done, every time that you practice patience and you're thinking of the other person's welfare, every time you think big and you think of practicing patience for everybody, right? The infinite beings, infinite accumulation of merit.
But as karmic things happen in the world, they don't happen against your own karma balance necessarily. So to your earlier point of good things happen to bad people.
Not sure I'm following. So if something good happens to you, that's a result of good karma that you created in the past. If something negative happens to you, then it's the result of negative things happening. So in terms of our day-to-day actions, and we want to cultivate more of direct our energy towards accumulating virtue by being kind to others.
Right.
Good karma. Collective karma. Yeah, so we talked about that a little bit, and whether or not there really is something that exists, that's called collective karma. We talked about this in the room class the other day, and I'd actually, we can ask Geshe-la because he's back, but I don't think that there is a collective karma per se. There's no overarching collective karma. Karma is always accumulated on an individual basis. So the idea was if you're in a plane crash, right? This is the proverbial example. Is if the plane goes down, you know, was there some kind of group karma that caused the plane to go down, or was it just, you know, almost like a coincidence that everybody had the karma for the plane to go down? And I think it's more of that second explanation. And then if one person survives the plane crash, you know, then let's say she had that karma to survive in that situation.
Are these karmic reactions in relation to the severity of the karma? So I'm just trying to reconcile from what you're describing. If you carried with you just vastly good karma relative to the average individual, if you die in a plane crash, back to the good things happen to bad people. I'm just trying to reconcile the different people probably have vastly different balances of good and bad karma. Yet people with balances that are vastly good still have very dramatic and bad things happen to them.
Well, so I think the idea is that even though, yeah, even on the right, so there is some kind of there's a mixture of positive and negative karma, and so you just never know when. All you need is just a little seed of negative karma to meet the right causes and conditions and come to fruition, you know, such that. So even though somebody seems like a really wonderful, you know, fantastic person, and they're doing everything right, but you don't know which seed is going to ripen. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It can happen so suddenly, right? Like another ordinary example is somebody could be walking around talking and going to work, and then the next day, boom, has a heart attack, doesn't show up on Monday. Happens all the time, right? All the time. Yeah. Did that answer your question, sort of? So this exercise that I wanted to do, a little exercise was the same one that we did yesterday in Nyack, but I thought it was kind of fun. And we'll come back maybe in the next class and just wrap up these final points. So we've been talking a lot about patience, and just for fun, working so hard at this, just for fun, try to think of a bumper sticker. We're thinking about slogans, a slogan that you want to see on the back of somebody's car about why patience is a virtue.
But I think this class and
oh man, I always forget. Thank you. Shoot, no, you're right, because there's a meeting. I am so sorry, Jackie. Thank you.
I didn't mean to.
No, you're absolutely right. No, because I was in Nyack yesterday, and that's the 2-hour class.
And your language
and like, I
class is
totally
2 hours
forgot.
too, so.
You guys get to go. We all get to go.
We did bumper stickers.
Bumper sticker. All right, you've got a whole week to think about a good bumper sticker. Okay. I definitely appreciate it. Yeah, people got to go. So my one example was instead of baby on board, ego on board.
Oh.
So think of something. All right. Have a good week. Take care. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Yeah, for sure. I'm so embarrassed. No, I didn't mean to do it. Yeah, thank you. I know, we got a meeting at 11:14. Oh my God. Cheese books.
It's been waiting for a long time.
To separate the two.
I'm sorry, I wanted to come earlier to hear the whole class. I'm so sorry I missed you.
Oh, it's okay.
All right. loved hearing you talk.
Oh no, we were just, it'll be on YouTube, so if you,
Oh, we will be.
yeah, all the classes are on YouTube. Bye, thank you.
How do you access it? What do you?
It's on, you know, the DNKL YouTube channel. They post all the classes.
Oh, so go into DNKL YouTube channel. Oh, that's what I'll do.
Geshe-la's teachings are there. Rinpoche's, the whole retreat is posted up there.
Oh, wonderful. All right, that's
Yeah.
great.
Thank you for coming.
You know, the way we had this. Yeah. And I think what she's thinking of is having.
For the,
And I don't think that will work, right? I didn't think so either, but you know, you don't.
oh,
I think it was good. I think it would be too confusing. So I just want to go and see if it's set up any other way. And I just wanted to know if you wanted to go, you don't have to. Okay, we were deferring.
I mean, that's my, that's my experience actually. But I went shopping for again this week, so another silk and a little silk,
But when he was,
Yeah, I mean, it's,
That's what you
it's just, I like doing it. And this is great for a shop in, I should say great, it's pretty good for a shop. There's a few little items that are special. Country that.
Florida is. No, I was just going to say that. I'm glad you said it. I didn't want to scare you because my mother was there and my grandmother got sick and they put her in the hospital. It was a nightmare. Yeah, you got it. I know.
I get up, but I'm so old.
are we still meeting? I really want to go closer. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, no, the black box. I think the black box is. It's not there. Oh, right there. Oh, there it is. Right there. There it is. So put it there. I do have different box. Yes. Yeah, I read that. Yeah. You. You always so passionate. Oh, you too. Okay.
There's words on my
It's such a burden to be fashionable. You have to maintain.
I know.
So you're gonna try.
And so now you're back, so you're 89 and you don't want to go through your life. And they can't, so it's.
We're just trying to figure out.
Yeah, and you know,
That- Florida.
you're a great life. And it's like a celebration. Like how much longer? How much longer do you think
Yeah, we'll see.
you know, as long as we're sometimes. He is, but.
What is it?
Oh, I know about this meeting.
Oh, it was about, it's the same as last week.
Florida?
Yeah. Scheduled to play too.
Oh, I have think that I'm barbershop. That's all I know. So that's me and Guy. That's it. No, I don't know. So it's probably Gloria. I'm gonna be here soon.
Yeah.
Because this class is over. So, yeah, I'm guessing she'll be here any minute.
Yeah, on tests and stuff like that. She
But
has
that's
like a
gonna be
nice
tough.
piece of, I went to her like every.
That's gonna be an all day thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
she's starting
but-
private
well,
school
you know,
as
the
well,
good thing
too.
is.
So that's like very restricting. So that's very good for her. She
You
came
had,
here on school.
I know. But do you think it's gonna go on strike?
Yeah.
And this sort of like, these are way to-
That's how I be in management in that
So
situation.
she-
That's that really-
and they got rid of her for the
Oh,
school.
who was the person that got killed? Do you know? They were off your road.
Very.
What was
individualized.
happening? What the
She's
heck
not gonna
happened?
do something.
Was she crossing the street? Was she running? What happened?
Part of the story is that yeah, she's still, she's like, the school is, they're older kids, it's all,
Yeah.
she's not. She's-
So I was thinking about that, that beach association.
Yeah.
Right, close, right, but you knew who she was. Yeah.
Yeah, she's adjusting better this year.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to figure out how to get her.
Because I saw, because I saw her up and so.
You know, if she goes to college,
Eyes
we
lock
want
out.
to go, so trying to figure out.
You're one of the people to call.
Yeah, I know,
right?
Well, I was.
Me? Do I sound sick? Yeah, I had a really rough weekend.
Chappelle? Oh, do you have the, actually said you have the, thingamajig.
Yeah,
Very, very.
Here's the thing